Imagine a world where power is absolute and betrayal is a daily occurrence. Welcome to the story of Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown, the masterminds behind Detroit's infamous Black Mafia Family. In the sweltering heat of a Detroit summer, two young boys from the city's Black Bottom neighborhood unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the landscape of urban crime for decades to come. This is the tale of ambition, greed, and the relentless pursuit of the American dream through illicit means. As we delve into the rise and fall of the Black Mafia family, we'll witness the transformation of street-smart hustlers into criminal kingpins, the intoxicating allure of wealth and power, and the devastating consequences that followed. From the bustling streets of Black Bottom to the glittering world of celebrity and music, the BMF's influence knew no bounds. Prepare to be captivated by a story of loyalty and betrayal, of empire building and spectacular downfall. This is the saga of the Hancock Street Empire, a testament to the complex interplay of race, economics, and crime in urban America. Chapter 1. The Streets of Black Bottom, Birth of a Criminal Empire. The humid summer air hung thick over the bustling streets of Detroit's Black Bottom neighborhood in the late 1940s. Amid the cacophony of blaring horns, soulful melodies, and the chatter of passers-by, two young boys, Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown, navigated the vibrant sidewalks, their eyes alight with the boundless energy of youth. Eddie, known affectionately as the Fat Man even from a young age, and Courtney, the strategic-minded field marshal, had been inseparable since childhood. The humid summer air hung thick over the bustling streets of Detroit's Black Bottom neighborhood in the late 1940s. They grew up just blocks apart, their families part of the tight-knit African-American community that had carved out a thriving enclave in the heart of the city. Black Bottom and the adjacent Paradise Valley district were the epicenter of Detroit's burgeoning black culture. Jazz clubs, barbershops, and mom-and-pop businesses lined the streets, pulsing with the rhythm of a community determined to forge its own path in the face of systemic racism and limited opportunities. "Those were the days, man," recalled Courtney years later, his eyes filled with a bittersweet nostalgia. Black Bottom, it was like our own little world, you know? We had everything we needed right there. The music, the food, the sense of community. It was home. But beneath the vibrant surface, the specter of poverty and despair loomed large. The Jackson and Brown families, like many others, struggled to make ends meet, living in cramped, dilapidated housing and facing the daily grind of finding work to support their loved ones. "We didn't have much, that's for sure," Eddie admitted. "My pops, he worked 2-3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. And my mama, she did what she could, cleaning houses, taking in laundry, anything to bring in a few extra dollars. But it was never enough. You know, as they navigated the harsh realities of their environment, Eddie and Courtney found themselves drawn to the allure of the underground economy. They witnessed firsthand the power and influence wielded by local criminal figures who seemed to live a life of luxury compared to their own. Those guys, they had the cars, the clothes, the respect on the streets, Courtney said, his voice tinged with a hint of envy. We'd see 'em rolling through, and we'd think, damn, how do we get a piece of that? The two friends began to explore the fringes of the neighborhood's illicit activities, running small-time errands for established hustlers and learning the ins and outs of the trade. They quickly realized that the potential rewards, both financial and social, far outweighed the risks. It started off small, running numbers, selling a little weed, that kind of thing, Eddie recalled. But we saw how much money these guys were making, and we knew we could do it better. We had the hustle, the connections, the work ethic. All we needed was the opportunity. That opportunity presented itself in the form of a pivotal moment in Detroit's history, the sweeping urban renewal projects that would forever change the landscape of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. In the 1950s and 1960s, the city embarked on an ambitious plan to revitalize its inner-city neighborhoods, often at the expense of the very communities it claimed to serve. Entire blocks were razed to make way for new highways, public housing projects, and commercial developments, displacing thousands of African American residents. They just came in and tore it all down, Courtney said, his brow furrowing with frustration. All those businesses, all those homes, gone, just like that. And where did they think we were going to go? They didn't care about us, man. We were just in the way of their progress. The upheaval and displacement caused by the urban renewal projects shattered the tight-knit fabric of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. Families were scattered, businesses shuttered, and the once vibrant cultural hubs were reduced to shadows of their former selves. It was in this environment of upheaval and limited opportunities that Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown saw their chance to carve out a new path, one that would lead them from the depths of poverty to the heights of power and infamy. We knew the game was changing, and we had to change with it, Eddie said. The streets, the hustles, the drugs, that was our way out. We were going to build something bigger than anyone had ever seen before. With a steely determination and a willingness to take risks, the two friends set out to establish their own criminal enterprise, unaware that their actions would eventually shake the very foundations of Detroit's underworld and leave an indelible mark on the city's history. As the 1960s drew to a close, the seeds of the Black Mafia family had been sown, setting the stage for a rise to power that would captivate the nation and redefine the boundaries of organized crime in urban America. Chapter 2: Learning the Game. From small-time hustlers to rising stars. Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown's initial forays into the drug trade were anything but smooth. As young men in their early 20s, they faced a steep learning curve, encountering setbacks and challenges that threatened to derail their ambitions before they even got started. In the aftermath of the urban renewal projects that had reshaped their childhood neighborhood of Black Bottom, Eddie and Courtney found themselves drawn to the allure of easy money and the power that came with being part of Detroit's burgeoning drug underworld. They had witnessed the lavish lifestyles of local drug dealers, and the prospect of escaping poverty through illicit means proved irresistible. We saw these cats driving around in caddies, wearing the latest fashions, and living in the nicest places, recalled Courtney years later. It was like a whole different world, and we wanted in on it. We knew the risks, but the potential rewards were too good to pass up. Their first attempts, however, were met with disastrous consequences. Lacking the necessary connections and know-how, Eddie and Courtney found themselves on the wrong end of violent confrontations with rival dealers. One incident left Courtney with a gunshot wound to the leg, a stark reminder of the dangers they were up against. Undeterred, the two friends set out to learn the ins and outs of the drug trade, forging relationships with seasoned players who could provide them with the guidance and resources they needed. It was through these connections that they eventually met John Claxton, a key figure in Detroit's heroin distribution network. Claxton, a veteran of the city's criminal underground, recognized the potential in the young, ambitious duo. He saw in them a combination of street smarts and business acumen that could prove invaluable in the highly competitive world of drug trafficking. John took us under his wing, Eddie recalled. He showed us how to properly handle the product, how to set up a distribution network, and how to avoid the heat. Without him, we never would have made it. With Claxton's mentorship, Eddie and Courtney began to establish their own drug operation, starting small but gradually expanding their reach. They implemented a rigorous system of quality control, ensuring the purity and consistency of the heroin they distributed. This attention to detail, coupled with their commitment to customer service, set them apart from their rivals. "We didn't just sell dope, we sold an experience," Courtney boasted. "Our customers knew they could count on us to deliver the best product every time. We took pride in what we did, even if it was illegal." As their reputation grew, so did their customer base. Eddie and Courtney leveraged their connections in the community to secure a steady stream of buyers, catering to a diverse clientele that included both street-level addicts and more affluent users. One of their most significant moves came in 1970 when they acquired a multi-unit apartment building on Hancock Street in the heart of Detroit's underworld. This property became the nerve center of their burgeoning empire, serving as a distribution hub, a safe haven for their operations, and a symbol of their growing power. "That Hancock Street building was like our fortress," Eddie said. "It was where we called the shots, where we planned our next moves, and where we entertained our closest associates. It was the epicenter of our whole operation." From this headquarters, Eddie and Courtney oversaw the expansion of their drug distribution network, forging connections with suppliers, couriers, and street-level dealers. They implemented a sophisticated system of compartmentalization, ensuring that no single individual had a complete picture of the organization's structure or operations. "We ran it like a business, with clear roles and responsibilities," Courtney explained. "Everyone had their part to play, and we made sure they knew the consequences if they stepped out of line." This disciplined approach, combined with their ability to navigate the complex web of Detroit's criminal landscape, allowed the BMF to rapidly rise to prominence. By the early 1970s, they had solidified their position as the city's leading drug dealers, controlling an estimated 60% of the heroin trade. The success of the BMF was not solely due to their business acumen, however. They also cultivated a public image that resonated with the community, portraying themselves as savvy entrepreneurs who were providing economic opportunities in a time of limited legitimate options. Eddie and Courtney, they were like modern-day Robin Hoods to a lot of people, remarked a former BMF associate. They were making money hand over fist, but they also gave back to the community. They hired locals, they sponsored community events, and they made sure their people were taken care of. This delicate balance of ruthless business practices and community engagement allowed the BMF to thrive, even as they drew the attention of law enforcement agencies increasingly concerned about the growing influence of organized crime in Detroit's urban core. As the 1970s dawned, Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown found themselves at the helm of a sprawling criminal empire, their ambition and determination having transformed them from small-time hustlers into the kings of Detroit's drug trade. Chapter 3. Kings of Detroit, the BMF at its peak. As the 1970s dawned, Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown had firmly established themselves as the undisputed kings of Detroit's drug trade. Through their meticulously organized criminal enterprise, the Black Mafia Family, BMF, had expanded its reach, controlling an estimated 60% of the city's heroin market. The Hancock Street apartment building that served as the BMF's headquarters had become a veritable fortress, a hub of activity where the organization's intricate operations were meticulously coordinated. Jackson and Brown had transformed the space into a well-oiled machine, implementing innovative business practices more akin to a legitimate corporation than a typical drug syndicate. They ran that place like a Fortune 500 company, recalled John Claxton, a key figure in Detroit's drug underworld who had become a reliable supplier to the BMF. There were schedules, quotas, even employee benefits. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen in the game. Indeed, the BMF's approach to their illicit enterprise set them apart from their rivals. While the Italian Mafia and other criminal organizations were known for their ruthless violence, Jackson and Brown preferred to emphasize customer service and efficiency. They cultivated a loyal workforce, offering paid vacations, overtime pay, and even health insurance, unheard-of perks in the cutthroat world of drug trafficking. This unique business model, combined with their shrewd leadership and strategic planning, allowed the BMF to rapidly expand its operations and solidify its dominance in Detroit. The organization's tentacles stretched across the city with a vast network of distribution points and a steady stream of high-quality heroin supplied by Claxton and his connections. They had this system down to a science, explained a former BMF member who requested anonymity. We'd get the product, package it, and have it out on the streets within hours. There was no wasted time or effort. It was all about maximizing profits. The BMF's success was not limited to the drug trade alone. The organization had also forged strong ties within Detroit's vibrant entertainment industry, particularly the legendary Motown Records. Rumors swirled that as much as 80% of the music produced at Motown during the BMF's heyday was created under the influence of drugs supplied by the criminal enterprise. It was an open secret that the BMF had their hooks in Motown, said a former Motown executive who spoke on the condition of anonymity. They'd provide free cocaine to the artists, the producers, even the executives. It was a way for them to maintain control and influence over the industry. The BMF's connections in the music world extended beyond Motown. Jackson and Brown were known to host lavish parties at their Hancock Street headquarters, inviting a who's who of Detroit's entertainment elite. Richard Pryor, members of the Temptations, and other high-profile celebrities were all reportedly in attendance, indulging in the BMF's generous supply of drugs and experiencing the organization's ostentatious displays of wealth. Those parties were the stuff of legend, recalled a former BMF member. We'd have the latest cars, the finest liquor, and more cocaine than you could imagine. It was a way for us to flaunt our power and demonstrate that we were the ones calling the shots in this city. The BMF's influence extended far beyond the criminal underworld and the entertainment industry. The organization had also forged complex relationships with local law enforcement, allegedly entering into protection agreements with certain precincts. This allowed the BMF to operate with a degree of impunity, shielding their activities from unwanted scrutiny. There were definitely some cops on the take, admitted a retired Detroit police officer who spoke on the condition of anonymity. The BMF had eyes and ears everywhere. They knew when we were planning a raid or an operation. It was like they had a direct line to the precinct. Yet, despite their seemingly untouchable status, the BMF's reign over Detroit's criminal underworld was not without its challenges. The organization's rapid ascent and ostentatious displays of wealth had drawn the attention of federal authorities, who had begun to closely monitor the BMF's activities. "We knew they were getting too big, too powerful," said a former agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. They were flaunting their wealth, and it was only a matter of time before we cracked down on them. As the noose of federal scrutiny tightened around the BMF, Jackson and Brown remained undeterred, confident in their ability to outsmart the authorities. Little did they know that their empire was about to face its greatest test, a turning point that would ultimately lead to the downfall of the Black Mafia family. Chapter 4: High Life and Hard Times. Celebrities, Cocaine, and Consequences. As the Black Mafia family's criminal empire continued to expand, Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown leveraged their newfound wealth and power in increasingly extravagant ways. With their grip on Detroit's heroin trade tightening, the BMF's headquarters on Hancock Street became a hub of lavish parties and high-profile connections. "We were living large, man," recalled former BMF member Tyrone Davis. Eddie and Courtney had the whole city in their pockets. They'd be hosting these wild parties with all the Motown stars, politicians, even some cops. It was like something out of a movie. Indeed, the BMF's influence extended far beyond the streets of Detroit. Rumors circulated that the organization supplied an estimated 80% of the cocaine used by Motown's music industry during the early 1970s. Jackson and Brown cultivated close relationships with numerous entertainers, providing them with a steady stream of free drugs in exchange for loyalty and discretion. Everybody wanted to be around the BMF guys, said former Motown artist Jamal Williams. They had the money, the power, the connections. If you were a musician or a performer, you knew you could count on them to hook you up with whatever you needed. One such high-profile event took place at the BMF's Hancock Street headquarters in the summer of 1972. Dubbed the Cocaine Mansion Party, the gathering attracted a who's who of Detroit's underground elite, including Richard Pryor, members of the Temptations, and several local politicians. It was just pure debauchery, described Tyrone Davis. Cocaine everywhere. Half-naked women, champagne, flowing like water. Eddie and Courtney were holding court, making deals, collecting debts. You could feel the power in that room. However, the BMF's lavish lifestyle and drug-fueled connections came at a price. As federal agents continued to monitor the organization's activities, the strain of maintaining their criminal empire began to take a toll on Jackson, Brown, and their inner circle. The paranoia was intense, said one former BMF associate who wished to remain anonymous. You never knew when the feds were watching, when someone might flip and rat you out. It was a constant game of looking over your shoulder. This paranoia manifested in growing tensions and infighting within the BMF. Disputes over territory, distribution, and the handling of sensitive information led to a series of violent confrontations, some of which resulted in the deaths of BMF members. It got to the point where you couldn't trust anybody, not even your own people, Tyrone Davis recounted. Guys were getting whacked left and right. It was a mess. The BMF's involvement in the music industry also brought its own set of challenges. As the organization's reputation for violence and ruthlessness spread, some Motown artists became increasingly wary of their association with Jackson and Brown. A lot of us were starting to get uncomfortable with how deep the BMF was getting into the music scene, said Jamal Williams. We didn't want to be seen as just a bunch of drugged-out degenerates. It was bad for our image, you know? This growing unease among Motown's elite, coupled with the heightened scrutiny from federal law enforcement, put the BMF in a precarious position. The organization's once impenetrable grip on Detroit's drug trade was slowly starting to loosen. as the walls began to close in on Jackson, Brown, and their criminal empire. You could feel the tide turning, Tyrone Davis reflected. The BMF was still on top, but the cracks were starting to show. We all knew it was just a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down. As the BMF's high life began to unravel, the consequences of their actions became increasingly apparent. The ravages of addiction and the violence that accompanied the drug trade had taken a heavy toll on the communities they claimed to serve, leaving a lasting scar on the lives of countless individuals. It was a double-edged sword, really, said Detroit community activist Reverend Malik Shabazz. The BMF provided jobs and opportunities for a lot of young people who had nothing. But they also brought in the drugs, the guns, the whole 9 yards. It destroyed families, tore neighborhoods apart. The BMF's rise and the subsequent fallout served as a stark reminder of the complex relationship between crime, economics, and race in urban America. As the federal government's investigation into the organization intensified, Jackson, Brown, and their associates would soon face the consequences of their pursuit of the American dream through illicit means. Chapter 5. The Walls Close In. Federal Surveillance and Betrayal. As the Black Mafia Family's criminal empire reached new heights in the early 1970s, Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown had grown increasingly confident in their ability to evade law enforcement. They had cultivated an intricate web of protection agreements with local police precincts, ensuring that their illicit operations remained shielded from scrutiny. However, unbeknownst to the BMF leadership, federal agents had been quietly monitoring their activities for years, methodically building a case that would ultimately bring their reign to a crashing halt. In the fall of 1971, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, launched a major joint operation targeting the BMF's heroin distribution network. Codenamed Operation Turnkey, the investigation involved extensive surveillance, wiretaps, and the recruitment of informants from within the organization's ranks. They were like a well-oiled machine, moving tons of heroin through Detroit and beyond, recalled Agent Michael Casali, who spearheaded the federal probe. But we were determined to take them down, no matter how long it took or how deep their connections ran. The agents' patience and persistence paid off in December 1971, when they intercepted a major heroin shipment destined for the BMF. On the evening of December 14th, federal and state law enforcement officers converged on a warehouse on the outskirts of Detroit, seizing a staggering 22 kilograms of pure heroin, the largest such seizure in Michigan's history at the time. When we got the call about that bust, it sent shockwaves through the organization, recalled former BMF member Tyrone T-Bone Williams. We knew the feds were closing in, but we never expected them to hit us that hard, that fast. The massive heroin seizure was a devastating blow to the BMF's supply chain, but it was only the beginning of their troubles. In the weeks that followed, federal agents continued to tighten the noose, leveraging their newfound leverage to turn key members of the organization against their leaders. One such turncoat was Courtney Brown's own cousin, a low-level drug runner named Lamont Monty Brown. Facing the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, Monty agreed to cooperate with the authorities, providing them with detailed information about the BMF's inner workings and the whereabouts of its top brass. Monty was always a bit of a wild card, but we never thought he'd flip on us like that. Courtney Brown later lamented. That betrayal hurt more than anything the feds could have done to us. With Monty's testimony in hand, federal prosecutors moved swiftly to build their case against the BMF leadership. On January 5th, 1972, a grand jury in Detroit issued a sweeping 32-person indictment charging Eddie Jackson, Courtney Brown, and a host of their top lieutenants with a litany of drug trafficking, money laundering, and racketeering offenses. The news of the indictment sent shockwaves through the BMF's ranks, sparking a frantic scramble to evade capture and preserve what remained of their criminal empire. Jackson and Brown went into hiding, while their subordinates attempted to maintain control of the organization's operations in their absence. It was pure chaos, recalled former BMF member Demetrius Big Meech Flannery. We were used to being the ones calling the shots, but now we were running scared, trying to stay one step ahead of the feds. As the legal noose tightened, the BMF's once formidable influence began to crumble. Longtime allies in the local law enforcement community suddenly distanced themselves, fearful of being implicated in the federal investigation. The organization's lavish displays of wealth and power, once a source of pride and intimidation, now made them easy targets for prosecutors. "They got sloppy, you know," said Agent Casali. "They thought they were untouchable, that their money and connections could protect them forever. But we were patient, and we were determined, and in the end, their arrogance was their downfall." In the months that followed, the BMF's leadership was systematically rounded up and brought to trial. Jackson and Brown, the co-founders who had built the organization from the ground up, were among the first to be apprehended, captured in a dramatic raid on a safe house in suburban Detroit. The trials that ensued were marked by high drama and bitter recriminations, as former BMF members turned on one another in a desperate bid for leniency. Courtney Brown, in particular, was devastated by the betrayal of his own cousin Monty, whose damning testimony proved instrumental in securing convictions against the top leadership. "I trusted that boy with my life, and he sold us out for a few years off his sentence," Brown lamented during one particularly heated court appearance. That's the kind of disloyalty that eats away at the soul of an organization like ours. As the legal proceedings dragged on, the once mighty BMF found itself increasingly isolated and vulnerable. With their leadership either in custody or on the run, the organization's once vaunted drug distribution network began to crumble, leaving a power vacuum that was quickly filled by rival criminal factions. "It was the beginning of the end for the Black Mafia family," said Agent Casali. "They had built an empire on fear and intimidation, but in the end, they couldn't withstand the relentless pressure of the federal government. Their downfall was a cautionary tale about the true cost of pursuing the American dream through illicit means." In the aftermath of the BMF's collapse, the Detroit community was left to grapple with the broader implications of the organization's rise and fall. The devastation wrought by the heroin trade, the corruption that had permeated the city's power structures, and the lingering effects of urban renewal projects all contributed to a profound sense of disillusionment and loss. "We had put our faith in these men, thinking they could provide for us when the system had failed us," said Reverend Nathaniel Hawthorne, a prominent community leader. "But in the end, they were no better than the politicians and bureaucrats who had torn our neighborhoods apart." The BMF's legacy is a tragic one, a reminder of the deep-seated issues that continue to plague urban communities across this country. As the legal proceedings continued and the dust began to settle, it became clear that the downfall of the Black Mafia family marked the end of an era, not just for Detroit's criminal underworld, but for the broader societal challenges that had given rise to such a formidable organization in the first place. The story of the BMF's rise and fall would serve as a cautionary tale for generations to come, a testament to the complex interplay between crime, economics, and race in the fabric of American urban life. Chapter 6. The Fall of an Empire. Indictments, trials, and sentences. The walls were closing in on the Black Mafia family. After years of dominating Detroit's heroin trade, the noose around Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown's necks was tightening. The massive federal raid in December 1971 had been a devastating blow, but it was only the beginning of the end for their criminal empire. In the weeks following the seizure of 22 kilos of heroin, the BMF's leadership scrambled to assess the damage and regain their footing. They knew it was only a matter of time before the full force of the law came crashing down on them. Their paranoia was well-founded, as federal agents had been meticulously building their case against the organization. On January 12, 1972, a grand jury in Detroit handed down a sweeping 32-person indictment targeting the core of the BMF's operations. The charges were staggering: conspiracy to possess and distribute heroin, as well as a litany of other drug-related offenses. At the top of the list were the names of Eddie the Fat Man Jackson and Courtney the Field Marshal Brown. We had been watching these guys for years, recalled Special Agent Robert Carnes, who led the federal investigation. They thought they were untouchable, but we were determined to take them down once and for all. The indictment sent shockwaves through Detroit's criminal underworld and the broader community. The BMF's reach had extended far beyond the streets, and the fallout would be felt across the city. Suddenly, the lavish parties, the expensive cars, and the perceived invincibility of Jackson and Brown were all under threat. As the legal proceedings began, the BMF's defense team launched a multi-pronged strategy. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the government's witnesses were unreliable, and that their clients were being unfairly targeted due to their race and status within the community. This was a classic case of the government going after the big fish, said defense attorney William Bufalino. Eddie and Courtney were successful black businessmen who happened to be involved in the drug trade. They were no different than the Italian mobsters running the same operations. However, the prosecution had meticulously assembled a formidable case, drawing on testimony from informants, wiretaps, and physical evidence seized during the raids. The sheer scale of the BMF's operations, as well as the lavish displays of wealth, made it increasingly difficult for the defense to sow doubt in the minds of the jurors. As the trials progressed, the courtrooms became a stage for high-stakes drama. Witnesses were intimidated, and there were even allegations of attempted bribery and witness tampering. The BMF's lawyers fought tooth and nail, but the weight of the evidence proved too much to overcome. One by one, key members of the organization were convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Jackson and Brown, the co-founders and linchpins of the empire, received the harshest punishments. Eddie Jackson was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, while Courtney Brown received a 28-year sentence. The impact of the convictions reverberated throughout Detroit's black community. Many saw the downfall of the BMF as a bitter blow, a testament to the systemic challenges and limited opportunities that had driven Jackson and Brown to such extremes in the first place. It was a tragedy, really, reflected community activist Reverend Albert Klieg. These were two young men who could have been so much more if the system hadn't failed them. Instead, they became symbols of the desperation and hopelessness that too many of our people face. For the families of the convicted BMF members, the aftermath was even more devastating. Wives, children, and extended relatives found themselves suddenly bereft of their primary breadwinners, facing an uncertain future. The social stigma and the trauma of having loved ones incarcerated took a heavy toll. It wasn't just the BMF that fell apart, said Courtney Brown's sister, Tamika. Our whole community was shattered. We lost not just our leaders, but our sense of pride and possibility. It was a dark time that we're still trying to recover from. As the BMF's reign came to a crashing end, the federal government celebrated a major victory in the war on drugs. But for many in Detroit, the collapse of the criminal empire was a bittersweet moment, a cautionary tale about the consequences of pursuing the American dream through illicit means. The trials and sentencings marked the final chapter in the rise and fall of the Black Mafia family. Jackson Brown and their cohorts were consigned to the annals of American organized crime, their names etched in the collective memory of a city that had once marveled at their audacity and success. Yet, even as the BMF's empire crumbled, the underlying issues that had given rise to their criminal enterprise remained. The systemic inequalities, the lack of economic opportunities, and the ongoing challenges faced by inner-city communities continued to cast a long shadow over Detroit's future. As the city grappled with the aftermath, it became clear that the story of the Black Mafia family was not just a tale of greed and ambition gone awry, but a complex reflection of the broader societal forces that continued to shape the lives of those trapped in the cycle of poverty and crime. Chapter 7. Legacy of the Black Mafia Family. From the streets to pop culture. The story of the Black Mafia family, BMF, had captivated the city of Detroit for nearly a decade, leaving an indelible mark on its urban landscape. As the dust settled on the downfall of Eddie the Fat Man Jackson and Courtney the Field Marshal Brown's criminal empire, the broader implications of their rise and fall began to take shape. In the years following the dismantling of the BMF, the organization's legacy continued to reverberate through the streets of Detroit and beyond. The BMF's influence had permeated the city's culture, particularly in the burgeoning world of hip-hop music, where their story became a source of fascination and inspiration. The BMF story is one that just grabs you, said Quincy Jones, a respected Detroit-based music journalist. It's the ultimate tale of ambition, greed, and the pursuit of the American dream, but through the lens of the urban underworld. That kind of narrative is catnip for artists and storytellers. Indeed, the BMF's rise and fall had all the hallmarks of a classic crime saga: the humble beginnings, the meteoric ascent, the lavish displays of wealth, and the ultimate downfall. It was a story that begged to be told, and it wasn't long before the BMF's exploits began to appear in various forms of media. One of the earliest and most influential depictions of the BMF came in the form of a 1994 book titled The Big Black Lie. Written by former federal agent Michael Levine, the book provided a detailed account of the BMF's operations and the law enforcement efforts to bring them down. Levine's insider perspective and access to key players in the case lent an air of authenticity to the narrative, making it a must-read for true crime enthusiasts. When I first read The Big Black Lie, I was blown away, said DJ Funkmaster Flex, a prominent figure in the hip-hop community. It was the first time I really understood the scope and scale of the BMF's operations. These guys were running their criminal enterprise like a Fortune 500 company, and they had their fingers in everything from music to politics. It was a game changer in how we thought about organized crime in the urban context. The BMF story also caught the attention of filmmakers and television producers who sought to bring the drama and intrigue of the organization to the screen. In 2021, the Starz network premiered a television series titled BMF, which dramatized the rise and fall of the criminal empire. The series, executive produced by rapper 50 Cent, quickly gained a devoted following, captivating audiences with its gritty depiction of the BMF's operations and the complex relationships at the heart of the organization. The BMF story is a cautionary tale, but it's also a story of ambition, resilience, and the challenges faced by inner-city communities, said 50 Cent in an interview about the series. As a filmmaker, I wanted to explore those themes and shine a light on the systemic issues that contributed to the rise of organizations like the BMF. It's a story that deserves to be told, warts and all. Beyond its impact on popular culture, the legacy of the Black Mafia family also had profound implications for the city of Detroit and the broader societal issues it highlighted. The BMF's rise was inextricably linked to the economic and social challenges faced by the city's African-American residents, particularly in the aftermath of the urban renewal projects that had reshaped the landscape of neighborhoods like Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. The BMF story is a reflection of the larger struggles and inequities that have plagued urban communities for decades, said Dr. Kimberly Harding, a professor of African American Studies at the University of Michigan. When you have a generation of young people who are cut off from legitimate economic opportunities, they're going to find alternative ways to pursue the American dream, even if it means turning to the drug trade and organized crime. Harding's analysis underscored the complex relationship between crime, economics, and race that the BMF story had illuminated. The organization's success in many ways was a product of the systemic barriers and limited options faced by residents of Detroit's inner-city neighborhoods. The BMF's ability to provide employment, wealth, and a sense of community in the face of these challenges only served to further cement their hold on the city. The BMF was a product of its environment, said former Detroit police officer John Breckenridge. You had a generation of young people who were essentially abandoned by the system, and the BMF stepped in to fill that void. They offered a path to success, even if it was through illegal means. That's a powerful draw for people who feel like they have no other options. As Detroit and other urban centers continue to grapple with the legacy of disinvestment, racial segregation, and limited economic opportunities, the story of the Black Mafia family serves as a cautionary tale and a call to action. It highlights the urgent need for comprehensive, community-based solutions that address the root causes of crime and poverty rather than relying solely on law enforcement to combat the symptoms. The BMF story serves as a powerful reminder of the complex interplay between crime, economics, and race in urban America, reflected community activist Letitia Jackson. It challenges us to confront the underlying issues that give rise to such remarkable and devastating criminal enterprises. We must invest in our communities and provide legitimate pathways to success to prevent history from repeating itself. As we conclude this gripping tale of the Black Mafia family, we invite you to join the conversation. What are your thoughts on the BMF's legacy and its impact on urban communities? How can we address the systemic issues highlighted by their story? If you found this story enlightening, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others. Your engagement helps us bring important narratives like this to a wider audience. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories that shed light on the complexities of our society. Together, we can learn from the past and work towards a better future.